What's up guys, Lon here from Android Authority, and the latest flagship from Meizu takes what was already great about the MX5 from earlier this year and puts it in a larger package. But what does this Pro version of the phone offer besides just a bigger size? Let's find out with the Meizu Pro 5. It's no secret that Meizu has been designing their smartphones to emulate Apple's for quite some time now, and the same way Apple releases a smaller and bigger version of their flagship smartphone, Meizu has also followed in those steps. Meizu has dropped the MX name, but the Pro 5 is essentially just a bigger version of the previously released MX5, so it has the same exact design with an all-metal unibody construction and rounded off corners and sides, which makes it pretty comfortable to hold. It's thin, relatively lightweight, and feels solid in the hand as you would expect from an all-metal body, but it is a little on the slippery side due to not having any sharp angles or a textured back to help with the grip. The Pro 5 is still, however, a sleek-looking and attractive device despite not being the most original of designs. The buttons and ports are in their typical locations with the power and volume buttons on the right side, which are both very clicky and tactile. Along the top is the standard 3.5mm headphone jack, followed by the dual SIM tray on the left, with the secondary slot doubling as a micro SD card slot for expandable storage up to 128 extra gigabytes if you need that extra storage. And finally, on the bottom, there's a single speaker, but instead of a micro USB port like on the MX5, Meizu has made the switch over to USB Type-C for the Pro 5, which was a very awesome change to see. In typical Meizu fashion, there's no capacitive or on-screen keys. Instead, you just have a single home button, but it also doubles as a back button by lightly tapping on it and a sleep/wake button when holding it down. The home button is very easy to press, but the feedback is a little bit mushy and the button itself feels kind of cheap, almost toy-like in a way. The screen measures in at 5.7 inches, a 0.2 inch increase over the MX5, which makes the Pro 5 a pretty large phone, but if you're used to phones with 5.5 inch or larger screen sizes, you'll have no problems adjusting to the Pro 5. It retains the same 1080p resolution as the MX5, and although it would have been nice to see a bump up to Quad HD, I really had no problems with 1080p on this particular panel. Text and graphics are still very sharp and easy to read, and consuming media is quite enjoyable as it usually is on such a large screen. It's an AMOLED display, so the colors are bright, vibrant, saturated, and full of contrast with excellent viewing angles, and all of it is covered in 2.5D glass for those subtle curves along the edges. 2.5D glass has been the rage in a lot of smartphones, but this is actually the first time Meizu has ever used it, and it blends in quite well with the curved body lines of the Pro 5. Inside, you might be surprised to find the Samsung-made Exynos 7420, the same processor that powered the Galaxy S6. Considering how powerful and efficient the Exynos 7420 is, this is a rather smart move by Meizu to use this chipset. RAM will be dependent on storage capacity with either 3GB of RAM on the 32GB version or 4GB of RAM on the 64GB version. Ours is the 32GB model, and performance has been as good as you would expect with such an ample amount of RAM and one of the most powerful processors currently on the market. The Pro 5 flies through all of the basic stuff like swiping, scrolling, opening and closing apps, and web browsing without any issue. Navigating through the interface is very responsive and fluid, and more intense tasks like graphically demanding games and heavy multitasking also prove to not be much of a problem either. The Pro 5 is definitely no slouch in the performance department, so no matter what you throw at this phone, it's not going to let you down. The Pro 5 has all the usual connectivity options for a modern day smartphone like Wi-Fi 802.11ac, GPS, Bluetooth 4.1, and LTE, but band support is quite limited, which meant HSPA plus data speeds during my usage on T-Mobile. It was still plenty fast for all of my needs, including YouTube, but just something to bear in mind for anyone in the States looking to import this device. The single speaker on the bottom gets surprisingly loud, and sound quality is actually quite decent, but it gets easily muffled when you're tightly gripping the phone during gameplay or watching videos in landscape, so you might find yourself adjusting your grip fairly often in order to not block it. The Pro 5 does, however, come with built-in hi-fi audio, which is great if you use your smartphone as your primary music player and will give you a much better audio experience when using headphones. Just like previous MX releases, the Pro 5 features a fingerprint scanner embedded in the home button that's very easy to use and features a tap and hold setup process that's very similar to what we've seen from the likes of Samsung and Apple. It's fast and reliable enough that you won't have any problems using it, but it isn't the most accurate fingerprint scanner that I've ever used. The majority of the time, it usually unlocks on the first attempt, but sometimes it'll randomly misread my finger even though it's squarely placed on the home button. If I had to put a number on it, I would say it works flawlessly 8 out of 10 times, so the times that it doesn't catch my print on the first go around is definitely not enough to ruin the experience. Battery life on the Pro 5 has actually been really good. It's got a large 30-50 mAh battery and I've had no problems getting through a full day. A lot of the times I was easily able to squeak out another half a day on a single charge, even with a couple hours of combined gaming and YouTube watching, which was pretty impressive, and screen on time consistently surpassed the 4-hour mark. The Pro 5 is also capable of fast charging through its USB Type-C port with Meizu's M-Charge 2.0 technology, which really came in handy anytime I needed to quickly top off my device. The main camera on the rear is a 21 megapixel shooter with phase detection and laser autofocus. The sensor is made by Sony, which is usually a pretty good sign that the phone is capable of producing good looking photos, and the Pro 5 can grab some great looking shots in adequate lighting. There's plenty of color, detail, and sharpness to be had, and the HDR image processing brightens up the image and brings back plenty of hidden details in the shadows without looking unnatural. It's when the sun starts setting or the lights get dim that everything starts to fall apart, and they fall apart rather quickly. Images begin to look soft and muddy with very little detail, and the camera tends to overexpose, leading to a lot of overblown highlights. What really cripples the camera experience on the Pro 5 is the camera software itself. The software is pretty simple and straightforward, but the entire interface is tailored for portrait orientation and doesn't rotate when switching to landscape, which makes it extremely cumbersome to use. Common modes like HDR are buried in the camera settings, and when using the camera in landscape mode, toggling between different modes becomes a slow and unintuitive process when you have to read everything sideways or rotate the phone back to portrait. For selfies, the camera interface works wonders, and the 5 megapixel front-facing shooter can certainly get the job done, but otherwise the camera UI makes for a less than desirable picture-taking experience. The Pro 5 is running on Android 5.1 Lollipop, but you wouldn't really know it due to Meizu's Flyme OS, which alters the entire Android experience altogether. There's no app drawer, so all of your applications will reside on the home screens, but this is nothing new and has been the ongoing trend with Chinese OEMs for quite some time now, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. The UI, however, is actually quite clean with some very nice transparencies, minimalistic looking icons, and isn't overly colorful like some other skins, although the pre-installed wallpapers might lead you to think otherwise. Flyme OS may not be your typical Android experience, but it also doesn't try to overwhelm you with features. There's just a few built in to keep things interesting, most of which are gesture based like double tap to wake, swiping downwards to bring down the notification shade, or drawing different characters on the screen to open up an application. There's also what Meizu likes to call Smart Touch, which basically puts a virtual joystick of sorts on your display that can be repositioned anywhere on the screen. It can be configured to do a variety of different actions, some of which are identical to the gesture controls. You can double tap to close an app, slide left to right on the screen to switch between tasks, and show the notification shade, just to name a few. The 32GB version of the Pro 5 is currently available for roughly $438 US and $485 for the 64GB version respectively. This isn't meant to be a cheap, affordable phone from Meizu, but it definitely isn't a bad price for the phone that you are getting. Meizu devices are not really meant for the US market, so the lack of LTE band support is rather unfortunate, but if you're a fan of the Meizu lineup, this phone isn't going to disappoint. With an all-metal build, a fingerprint scanner, a beautiful 5.7-inch display, USB Type-C, and some very powerful internals driving the whole experience, the Pro 5 is easily the best flagship Meizu has released to date and certainly shouldn't be overlooked. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below, and also subscribe to the channel, which is also down below if you haven't already. And if you want to see more here from us at Android Authority, make sure to check out the links over on the side, and also check out the website as well for more in-depth coverage, because we are your source for all things Android.